Good morning, everyone. I'm Lyndall Stout, and we have another great show lined up for you today on SUNUP. We're continuing our discussion on replacement heifers and their important role in the cattle industry. With colder weather in the forecast, is it time to blanket your horses? And a group of 4-H'ers get a hands-on animal and food science learning experience. Grab that fresh cup of coffee because an all-new SUNUP starts right now. We begin again this week with Dr. Amy Hagerman, our OSU Extension Ag Policy Specialist, talking about the new spending bill, in particular how things are going to affect agriculture. You've had some time now to kind of review some of the details.
Yeah, so there are some really great details in here that I think will be beneficial to Oklahoma agriculture, and some things that we've been discussing for a while now with producers that they really wanted to see going forward.
A lot of those details you mentioned impact USDA. Kind of give us the rundown that Oklahoma producers specifically may want to keep track of.
Yeah, there are several, and we'll break them down by agency by agency. So first, for the Farm Service Agency, there's some assurance that county offices will remain open even as this reorganization process continues to be discussed at USDA. There's also $15 million being set aside to fill existing and anticipated vacancies within the agencies. In addition, the NRCS, the Natural Resource Conservation Service, is going to receive additional funds for technical support for producers. These are those initial consultations with producers that allow them to get an idea of what a conservation plan could be for their particular office. In addition, for the National Agricultural Statistics Service, the July cattle report is going to come out each year going forward. We've missed a couple of years of that report, and producers really wanted to see it. That's critical timing in terms of planning for their calf crop for the coming year and what markets might be doing in the fall. Also, there's provisions there to keep research stations open. That's research that comes back to us out in the states and helps us both as a land-grant university and then also as an extension service to get good research-based information out to producers in the state. And finally, the cattle contract pilot program, which is there to kind of increase this transparency in cattle prices over time, received an additional infusion of funds. So you put all of these things together and you really have a lot of assurance of continuing services for cattle producers and farmers in the state.
SNAP was a big part of the discussion the last couple of months. Where are we there in terms of SNAP recipients receiving payments and kind of things starting to get rolling again?
So these things always take a little bit of time, but the payments are rolling back out to those families that are in need, that need those food services over time. There is also, I will say, some assurance of SNAP benefits being available all the way out through the end of the fiscal year in this bill. So even though some agencies may be in a continuing discussion or even a partial government shutdown in January, depending on what happens, those food benefits will be there for families that need them all the way out through the end of the fiscal year, which is September 30th, 2026. And that's some needed assurance for families that were struggling in the last month during the shutdown.
Usually fall pretty busy time for our producers interacting with the USDA folks and various programs.
Yeah.
Kind of what's that scenario going to look like this time around?
So I've already started hearing from some colleagues at USDA. They are definitely hard at work trying to address the backlog that has sort of built up over that window of time. They're going to prioritize getting some of those payments out right away that would usually come out in October. And then also we've got all our normal activities that would occur in October, November, like crop progress reports, planting reports, also any kind of applications that might be coming out going forward we would normally see in the fall, like EQIP or your ARC and PLC election. We should start seeing those announcements very soon.
Okay. Very good. Amy, thanks for the update, and I'm sure we'll see you again very soon.
Registration is now open for the Winter Crop School at Agricultural Hall on the OSU campus December 16th and 17th. It all begins at 10 a.m. with 7 sessions focusing on crop production across Oklahoma. Early registration is $175 until December 1st and includes lunch for both days. Space is limited, so be sure to sign up now. For more information and a link to register, scan the QR code on your screen or visit sunup.okstate.edu.
Good morning, everyone. This is State Climatologist Gary McManus with your Mesonet weather report. Well, it has started raining again. We're very thankful for that change in the weather pattern. I thought it would be useful to go back and take a look at our rainfall statistics for the fall thus far, see where we're at before the changeover, and maybe why we got into this horrible drought situation. And also, let's take a look at that new drought monitor map. Well, the new drought monitor map looks worse than last week, shockingly enough. We did increase some of that D3 extreme drought across the state. Not a very big portion of the state, but if you look at those red colors, that's where we saw those start to get a little bit bigger, spread a little bit. Also that brown color, the D2 severe drought also increased, and also the moderate drought increased. And then we also spread that abnormally dry conditions, the yellow color, up farther into north central Oklahoma. So by just the count of the drought monitor, the drought did increase over the week, but really we're just playing catch up over the last several weeks as this flash drought has started to impact the previous drought condition. Speaking of flash drought, take a look at the consecutive days with less than 1/10 of an inch of rainfall map from the Oklahoma Mesonet. You can see we're now up to basically 3 weeks without significant rainfall across the state of Oklahoma. And remember, during that time it was also very warm, with several days with unusually warm temperatures, record temperatures in fact. So, you know, the hot weather and the lack of precipitation did accelerate that drought to more of a flash drought situation over the last month or so. Okay, rainfall since the start of climatological fall, and that's September 1st through November 17th, this Tuesday before the rains. And you can see those areas of the greens and the light greens, the yellows. Those are areas that simply have not gotten enough rainfall over that 78-day period through much of the fall thus far. So some of those areas, you know, less than 1.5 inches of rainfall. So a very tough go across the southwestern quarter of the state, extending over into south central and southeastern Oklahoma and other smaller areas across the state. Shows up quite well on the departure from normal rainfall map for that same time frame. You can see areas in the darker red, 6 to 7 to even as much as 8 inches below normal in those areas. The oranges, more like 4 to 6 inches below normal. And then the other deficits across the state. Very few areas have surpluses over that time frame, just a small area in northwestern Oklahoma and out across the western Oklahoma panhandle. Another view of that deficit situation, this is the percent of normal rainfall map for that same time frame, and you can see a large area of the state, basically around 25% of normal, those red areas, even a little bit lower in some cases, in the orange less than 50% of normal on average. Again, very few places had above normal conditions over that time frame. So we're dealing with two types of drought situations here. The longer term drought that started really back in the early to mid fall, and then also the flash drought which started in the last few weeks. Statistics for the autumn thus far ranked over the last 105 years across the state of Oklahoma. We can see the statewide average about 4 inches below normal, the 14th driest such period on record. But you can also see other parts of the state like south central Oklahoma had their 8th driest at more than 6 inches below normal. Same thing for southeastern Oklahoma, west central Oklahoma, 15th driest on record. Central Oklahoma about 5 inches below normal with their 11th driest. September 1st to November 17th on record. So again, just a very dry fall for Oklahoma that accelerated this drought. A pattern change is exactly what we needed. Get out of this drought situation that's been intensifying and spreading, get into more of a rainy pattern, maybe even some wintry weather as we go forward. But again, it's very much welcome. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
I'm Darren Scott, food scientist with the Food and Agricultural Products Center, and today I'm with Dr. William McGlynn talking about food safety for the holidays. You know, one of the things that you want to keep in mind when you are thawing your turkey for Thanksgiving is that you want to keep that bird out of the danger zone, which is above 40 degrees Fahrenheit, but below 140 degrees Fahrenheit. So what you want to do is to thaw your bird in the refrigerator. You want to give yourself about 1 day for every 4 to 5 pounds of turkey. That way you keep the temperature of the turkey below 40 degrees Fahrenheit. If you're pressed for time, you want to thaw your bird in the intact packaging, submerged in cold water. You want to take about 30 minutes, and every 30 minutes or so, you're going to refresh or replenish that water until the bird is thawed, and then you'll cook immediately. What you don't want to do is attempt to thaw the bird at room temp on your countertop. In this temperature range, bacteria can grow very rapidly.
So we focus a lot on food safety as it relates to cooking turkey, and there are certainly the food safety hazards that Darren talked about there. But it's important to keep in mind that other types of foods can be hazardous as well. For example, you may be familiar with the recommendation to cook the stuffing outside of the turkey rather than inside the bird. And the reason for that is the body of the turkey kind of insulates that stuffing. So by the time you cook it long enough for that stuffing to get up to the required temperature, you may have dried out the turkey. And a lot of people don't even check the temperature of the stuffing. They're checking the temperature of the turkey to decide when it's done. And so that's a potential hazard. Other foods can be hazardous as well. If you can cook a food straight from the refrigerator or the freezer, something like a gravy or other sauces or maybe a dense casserole, that's the best way to do it. And there are other foods that can be hazardous as well that we don't necessarily think about. Things like pumpkin pie, any pie really with dairy or eggs or something like that. That can be a food safety hazard, and so it's very important. You want to refrigerate those as soon as possible after people have enjoyed them.
Remember, the same science applies whether you're cooking food for family and friends or you're producing food for commercial sale. So, William, what is your favorite food for the holidays?
I'm pretty easy to please. Anything with gravy.
All right. Me too. Anything but cranberry. Thanks for joining us. Have a happy holidays.
November so far has seen some pretty mild temperatures, but as the cold weather starts to approach, when's the best time to think about blanketing your horses? OSU Extension equine specialist Dr. Kris Hiney gets us up to speed.
Hi, I'm Dr. Kris Hiney, OSU's Equine Extension Specialist, and we're going to talk a little bit today about blanketing as we move into the colder weather. So one of the questions that horse owners often have is, should they put a blanket on their horse or not? Well, and as always, in Extension, we're going to say it depends. Certainly, if you have a horse that doesn't have very much of a hair coat, so he's kind of moved in from warmer conditions, or you've held him under lights, those horses are going to need blankets with the colder weather. However, if you've let them grow a full, thick, fluffy hair coat, a lot of the times Mother Nature has done everything we need to actually blanket those horses, and blanketing them ourselves can actually kind of keep the horse maybe a little colder if they get wet, kind of block their or dampen down their hair coat, or remove all that air layer in there. So let's talk about conditions where we may think that blanketing is especially warranted. If your horse is older or thin, immunocompromised, any of those horses that maybe just aren't as robust, blanketing can actually help them out quite a bit. And so those are horses I would consider for blanketing. Again, if your horse has a short hair coat, those are horses that will probably need blanketing. And then how cold it actually is. So if it's only dropping down to 40 degrees, horses are going to be just fine. We want to make sure they're protected when it's really cold and windy, because that can be harder on the horses, or if it's wet. However, if you provide shelter from the wind, shelter from rain, again, with a normal hair coat, these horses are going to do quite well. So it isn't necessary to blanket all horses in the winter. However, some people may ask, do the horses actually want to wear a blanket? And there is actually some fun research where they did ask horses whether or not they want to have blankets. Turns out if it's kind of cold, damp, and rainy, they actually appreciated the blankets. But if it was a sunny day where they could feel the sun on their hair coat, horses chose to just go kind of Mother Nature. So again, we really want to think about, is the conditions actually warranted? So sometimes leaving a blanket on can actually be harmful. We know that Oklahoma temperatures go up and down quite dramatically during the day. And so if it was chilly at night, but you leave the blanket on during the daytime and it ends up being warm, they can sweat quite a bit under those blankets. So in that case, it's better off leaving them not on. Also, if blankets don't fit well, you can actually cause some rubbing on the horse and can cause sores. And if they're in disrepair, if we're having a leg strap break or a hole, horses can actually get themselves pretty tangled up in blankets that are kind of falling apart or in disrepair. So you have to always check fit, check the condition the blanket is in before you walk away and leave the horse blanketed for the day. You do need to choose a blanket size that fits for your horse, and there are some measuring guides that you can actually measure the horse beforehand before you go and buy a blanket. But essentially, if you're running your hand up under that blanket on their shoulder or up over their withers and there's pinching or kind of tightness on your hand, that's going to again kind of rub on the horse and cause some problems. Certainly if it's too loose that it's hanging back off the horse or it's not going to fit snug, blankets with belly bands, if that horse can get their leg up under there, that can essentially kind of cause quite a bit of trouble. So a lot of the blanket manufacturers have excellent fitting guides. I would encourage everyone to measure your horse first and then check the blanket fit after it's on. For more information about blanketing and winter horse care, visit the SUNUP website for more information.
A double dose of congratulations is in order for 2 OSU animal science teams. Members of the livestock judging team are your 2025 national champions, bringing home the prized bronze bull from the North American International Livestock Expo in Louisville, Kentucky this past week. Currently coached by Parker Henley, this is the 24th national championship for OSU's storied livestock judging program, more than any other school. And hats off to Oklahoma State's horse judging team as well, winners of the world champion title earlier this month at the 2025 American Quarter Horse Association Collegiate Judging Contest. Stephen Cooper and Amy Hoffman coached this outstanding group. Way to go, teams!
Good morning, Oklahoma. Welcome to Cow-Calf Corner. Our topic this week is breeding objectives and selection pressure as we continue our series on replacement heifers and building back our nation's cow herd better. What is a breeding goal? It's basically the notion of the best type of animal that we're hoping results from our selection and mating program. Selection pressure is how we apply pressure to certain traits in order to accomplish that breeding goal. Now, breeding objectives, selection pressure become really important in commercial cow-calf operations as we think about generating replacement heifers. The selection and mating decisions we're making right now are going to result in the cows that we're living with a decade down the road. So, we want to be deliberate and intentional in the way we think about breeding objectives and where we're going to apply selection pressure. A quick example. If we select for all the weaning and yearling weight that we can possibly get and never pay attention to mature cow size or mature cow height, those traits are all highly positively genetically correlated, and we could end up tethered to a cow herd for a decade that's really big and has a really high input cost. As opposed to that, if we determine an upper limit of mature cow weight and mature cow height that we're willing to accept, and then apply selection pressure to more weaning and yearling weight relative to that, we probably end up with a more optimum trade-off with regard to weight of calves and revenue generated each year relative to those input and maintenance costs on the cow herd that we're paying for year-round. We always say 80 to 90% of genetic change over time is a result of sire selection. Whether we're picking out herd bulls, picking out AI sires, or picking through those heifers that we just weaned and determining which one to become cows, additive genetic change is a cumulative and permanent thing if we can achieve what we want. 4 things to keep in mind about any trait before we include it as a breeding objective or apply selection pressure. First is the heritability, that proportion of phenotypic variation that is due to additive genetic variation. Second thing is measurability. We've got to be able to measure a trait before we can effectively select for it. Third thing is economic importance. We want to make sure that a particular trait at a particular level is contributing to the profit potential of our cow-calf operation. And the fourth thing is the genetic correlation of that trait relative to other things we are including or maybe not including in a selection program. I refer back to that previous example of what happens to mature cow size if we never pay attention to it while selecting for weaning and yearling weight. Final take-home point this week: your proper breeding objectives and where you apply selection pressure is unique to your own commercial cow-calf operation. Shouldn't be based on what your neighbors are doing or who you buy bulls from. You really need to analyze your production system. Take a look at your forage base, your financial situation, when you intend to market calves. We'll get into that deeper next week when we talk about analyzing that production system and some of those performance metrics that you want to take into consideration. Until then, thanks for joining us on Cow-Calf Corner.
Finally, today we get to tag along with a few Payne County 4-H members who recently had the great experience of taking an animal from the farm all the way to the finishing stage. SUNUP intern Audra Boyer put together our story.
This isn't your typical meats evaluation class walking into OSU's meat processing cool room. Payne County 4-H members and families are seeing the final results of their beef production projects.
Well, this is a brand new program for Payne County, and so we were exploring some ideas of how we could promote the beef industry as a whole in a positive light.
Payne County Extension agricultural educator Jennifer Patterson wanted youth participants to get hands-on experience.
And so what better way than to involve our youth who are in the livestock industry and get different community partners involved. So this is a start to finish. These kiddos, purchased or had ranch-raised steers from home. And so we weighed them, had an initial weight in May. They fed them out for 150 days. And during that time, we had different educational programs, about nutrition, about genetics, about carcass value and quality, different things like that. The last program, they get to actually evaluate their carcasses here.
So what knowledge did these students like Jacob May absorb?
It's been really insightful. I learned a lot, definitely, just with feeding and rationing and just waking up and taking care of animals in the morning. I live on the farm, so I do a lot with the butcher cattle and the pairs, and we wake up every morning and feed them.
I've got a great group that we've kind of created a committee for this contest, and we were toying some different ideas of what we could do for the kids that are involved in the cattle industry, but not on the show side. So this was just a way for them to be involved, and what better way than a hands-on field experience with these calves.
For Natalie Stayskool, the program has allowed her to see how hard work pays off and gain a new appreciation.
So this experience has actually been very impactful for me, as the calf that I used, I watched him from growing from whenever he hit the ground all the way to butcher, and because he was actually one of our wattle calves. So we got to raise him, and it really helped me grow and learn more about nutrition, as well as really just get a close bond with him and stuff. So it's been a really impactful and good experience for me.
You put a lot of effort into nutrition and genetics and the raising of livestock.
Joel Jackson is the program director and meat plant manager at the Robert M. Kerr Food and Agricultural Products Center at OSU.
But ultimately getting able to see the full picture, seeing the fruits of their labor, if you will, see what type of product that they produce. I think it's very rewarding personally, but also on an individual basis in terms of education to see how those changes and how those improvements can be made, not only from an individual student, but also even as a collective group of producers. As people learn, as people understand the contest, understand selection and nutrition and all the other factors that go in on the live side, that definitely has a result on the impact of the carcass merit and overall carcass quality.
And it's not just the students that are learning.
And that's the other neat thing about this contest. It's a youth contest, but we invite the families to all the educational programs as well, because it all, mom and dad and grandma and grandpa, whoever's involved, we want them to get that education and experience too.
In Payne County, I'm Audra Boyer.
That'll do it for our show this week. A reminder, you can see SUNUP anytime on our website, follow us on social media, and stream us anytime on YouTube, youtube.com/SUNUPTV. We leave you today with a few pictures of the recent pecan harvest at the Cimarron Valley Research Station at Perkins, followed by a Thanksgiving send-off from students in OSU's Ferguson College of Agriculture. From all of us at SUNUP, we want to wish you and your family a very happy Thanksgiving, and we want to thank you for being loyal viewers of SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. We'll see you again next week.